So, hello, Mr. Simon Winder. My first question would be um, what was it like to you to write this book about the Habsburgs?
Um, I would like to say that it was very hard work, but it was actually just very enjoyable. I had an excuse to visit a lot of fascinating parts of Europe. I had an excuse to spend a lot of time on trains reading endless books about the Habsburgs, and it was all together an incredibly enjoyable experience. It gave me an excuse to visit places like what's now Western Ukraine, for example, or Transylvania, or Carniola, or Trieste, or all these places where there's been a Habsburg rulership and the way that they're all united through architecture and so on. And it was a privilege to write it, really. There's a few more interesting things than travel for a purpose. And so the sense of travel for a purpose meant that writing of the book was a constant interest. It means you're alert the whole time, wherever you are, walking through even a very small town, because you know that sooner or later you're going to see something interesting which you hadn't thought about, and which will change the way you think about that town. And I would recommend anyone to visit Transylvania particularly, which I think is one of the great areas of Europe, and to me a total discovery. So yeah, that's my conclusion.
And why did you write the book? So, where came the idea from? And
I wrote it because of my previous book, Germania or Germania, and I restricted that to the modern German state. And when I finished that book, I realized I'd made a mistake, and it was too late to change it, which is that obviously the history of the German state is much wider than that. It was a very useful way of organizing things, and my interest in Europe really came from the moment the Berlin Wall came down. I remember flying out to East Germany to be able to look round it before it changed. And I remember going to cities like Magdeburg and Dresden and so on. So I felt I'd done that years before, and it was a marker for I needed to come back. And so and at the time I was living in America, and so Germany seemed a very long way away. And so I did all these travels around Germany, and I felt that was the new unified Germany. It was all I could write about. But when I finished the book, which is a long book, I realized I needed to write another long book to talk about the rest of the German-speaking world, and also to talk about everything to do with the Habsburgs and moving further east. So it was a natural thing to write. And then I wrote another book on Lothringen, on the area between France and Germany, so the Netherlands all the way down to the Alps, which again I suddenly realized I'd missed out. So I should have written one book. I wrote 3 books by mistake. It's a celebration of my own incompetence.
And what do you think? What's the heritage of the Habsburg dynasty, especially in a European context or dimension?
I think the Habsburg dynasty is the most important origin for the European Union. They would have hated it themselves, but the idea that Europe had a unity beyond the nation state, and the way that, for example, the Franco-Prussian War and 2 world wars and the Cold War put the idea of Europe under such huge stress. I tend to think that when thinking about the European Union, it's interesting that so many of the states that originally joined were previously part of a wider organized, the Netherlands, Belgium, and so on. There was a wider point at which they'd all joined before. And so I think it made it easier in a way for the European Union to exist, that its members, its original core membership did have this sense of mutual trust earlier on in some way. I mean, it's not all there is to it, but I think it's the most interesting. The existence of the Habsburg Empire or the Holy Roman Empire turned out to be in many ways a more attractive model than individual states fighting each other. And so I think there is that. It's an important story as part of the background, though it doesn't tell the whole story, of course.
Thank you so much.
Phew. So